Welcome to another virtual author chat with the Poison Pen Bookstore. I'm John Charles, and today I'm delighted to welcome author Amanda Cox, whose new book, The Bitter End Birding Society, will soon be available in bookstores like the Poison Pen and libraries near you. If you'd like to order a copy from us at the Poison Pen, please feel free to give us a call or go online. We would be happy to hold a copy for you to pick up or put one in the mail. Now I'd like to welcome author Amanda Cox.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me today.
Thank you for joining us. My first question for you is one that I like to ask authors because we sometimes think they kind of just spring forth fully formed, but they have a past. Who was Amanda before you became a published author?
So, before I was a published author, my background was in professional counseling. So, I spent a lot of time sitting with people while they're working through difficult parts of life and having those conversations. And it was kind of interesting to me when I decided to stay home with my children and I started writing. The way that some of the things that I incorporated into counseling sort of naturally flowed into the things that I wrote.
Hmm. When did you decide you wanted to really pursue writing as a career, and what was it like getting your first book published?
So again, my second child was about to be born when I was like, I'm an avid reader. I love to read. It's kind of one of those things that was kind of in the back of the mind of my mind in childhood and things like that. But I just had a story that I thought I'd try to write and just see if I could do it. And then once I had written it, I was like, well, let's find out what this publishing thing looks like because it's a different world than the writing world. And
Mhm.
so I think it was just a way for me to learn and kind of challenge myself a little bit. And in the process, I realized that I'd always kind of been a storyteller at heart and that I loved writing and I wanted to write more. And so it was a bit of a journey getting that first contract and several years of writing because my kids are really, really small. So it was kind of a slow journey there for a little while. But then I ended up getting my first publishing contract in kind of a weird way. I had done all of the normal going to conferences and sending out the query letters, and I was getting a lot of rejection, some of them very kind, but they were still no at the end of the day. And then I was like, well, I'll just shelve this book and work on something else because that's what writers do. We write. And there was a pitch party on Twitter when it was Twitter at the time.
Wow.
And you would just put 150 characters of what your book was about, and then agents and editors would search the hashtag and see if they saw something they were interested in. And so I ended up meeting my acquiring editor at my publishing house through this pitch party, which it was kind of a bit of a whirlwind. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. Your first book was The Edge of Belonging. Is that correct?
Yes.
And now we've got come to your new book, which will soon be out next month, The Bitter End Birding Society. What can you tell us about the book?
So it's about this young woman who has been through a traumatic experience in her hometown, but because of the way she handled it, everybody kind of is like, "You're a hometown hero," and they really celebrate who she is. But she doesn't feel that way at all. And so the past year, besides overcoming the trauma that she's been through, it's also an aspect of having all of this attention that she really doesn't want. And so she decides that she's going to spend the summer with her great aunt in this little town called Bitter End, Tennessee, and she's just sort of gonna hide away somewhere where she can be a little bit anonymous and find a little bit about her family roots. But her summer does not go to plan at all. And she ends up adopted kind of against her will by this quirky group of bird watchers. And along the way, figures out that she has a biological connection to one of the members of the birding society. And it's the severed branch of her family tree that resulted when a moonshiner's daughter fell in love with a preacher's son. And so the simple summer that she anticipated is not exactly what she had in mind, but it's a really fun story about reconciliation and second chances.
It seems like the last couple of years there's been a renaissance of interest in bird watching. I'm not quite sure why, but what prompted you to think, I want to explore this in my new book?
So there are a couple of connections that I have with bird watching. One on the personal side of it, I'm not an expert bird watcher, but I am someone who loves my backyard birds, and I love knowing what kind of birds they are and kind of how they migrate through and things like that. And that love really stemmed from, around the time my first child was born, and he didn't sleep very much at all. And the only time he wasn't fussy is if I was standing up with him and holding him. And so to kind of save my sanity, I started standing at my back window and watching the backyard birds.
Mm.
And the more I watched them, the more I realized what a variety of species were out there. And I found it to be really calming and relaxing, and it was soothing me while I was soothing him. And so, um, always find peace in nature, and so I really wanted to write a book that explored that. Another aspect of this story, and why bird watching was really fun for me is that anytime I've encountered a group of bird watchers, or a friend has told me about an encounter with a group of bird watchers, I always hear how they are just the most welcoming group of people, and they're so excited to share what they're looking for and what they see and their passion in their hobby. And I can remember one time when my kids were pretty small, we were hiking in the woods of Maine, and we did not know these people at all. And suddenly they've got my kids showing them through binoculars the birds that they're looking for. And so when I was writing this story, I had those groups of people in mind and just the wonderful community that is there and just the excitement to invite people in.
When I was reading the book, I thought the setting was just so wonderful, but I thought this has to be something bitter end that you made up. But it's not. There really is a bitter end. And it kind of played, the real place played I would say, somewhat of a role in shaping your book.
Absolutely. I when I was originally had the idea for the book, it was going to be a present day story, and it was just going to be about a group of bird watchers and sort of this ensemble cast, and it is somewhat that. But I had looked up quirky Tennessee town names, and I was like, Bitter End, okay, that's a place with a story. I need to go and learn about this place. And, it's about a 4-hour drive. So we all loaded up in the minivan to go and find Bitter End, Tennessee. It comes up in the GPS. And so we follow this whole all the way there. And then we're going up this mountain and we get to the top of it, and the GPS says, You have arrived. And we're like, We have arrived where? Because there's nothing here. We expected at least like a little sign that said, Welcome to unincorporated area, Bitter End, Tennessee. But there was nothing there. And we were like, maybe we took a wrong turn. So we go back down and we're asking everybody in the surrounding towns if they've heard of Bitter End, Tennessee. And nobody had. They all looked at us like we'd lost our mind and we were making it up. But we're like, maybe I'll have to, do something different. We had pretty much given up on ever finding a bitter in Tennessee, and we were on our way out of the Roan Mountain area, and we're leaving the visitor center of Roan Mountain State Park. And a lady overheard my husband and I talking about like looking at the historical books to see if we could find something about it. And she said, "Oh, I know where Bitter End is." And we were so shocked because we that's the opposite of what we'd heard all day. And she started telling us the story of growing up there and that it was a lot of moonshiners that lived up on that mountain. And so then I was like, okay, this story now has to have a moonshiner and it has to be a part of this story.
Um, you really give readers a lot to think about in the book, and there's a couple things that really struck me. One of them was a statement that one of the characters made. And I think it applies to Anna Lee, but it can apply to any of us. We are not defined by the events in our lives, but rather by how we react to them. Because Anna Leah, her life, at least she thinks it's being shaped by this event in her recent past.
Yeah, and I think that's very true. It's part of the things that we encounter, we take those in and we see ourselves through the lens of those things. And so I wanted to challenge that a little bit in the story in how she's processing what she's going through. And hopefully, as readers are reading, they may think back to some circumstances in their life and like, oh, wow, I really allowed that to shape how I see myself. And do I want to continue seeing myself through that lens? Is there something in the way going forward that I might want to do differently than I have in the past?
It's also a story about letting go of things, of accepting ourselves and others. And in particular, there's a relationship between two women that they have to come to a resolution. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so there are two women in the story that even though they live just down the street from each other, they have not had a real conversation with each other in 60 years. And it's a really complicated relationship. And as you travel through the story and you see the present day timeline and the past timeline, You can begin to see why there might be some animosity here. You get to see how sometimes there's parts of us that don't ever really grow up. We go through certain things in childhood and we kind of have that inner child that's still there. And so through this process, Anna Leah's really wants to hopefully knit these two women back together because both of them in their own way have kind of become important to her and they make up part of her family tree. And she is looking from the outside looking in and she's like, I'm not really sure why this is such a big deal. But to those two women who had gone through all of those things, it's a very big deal and it's wrapped up in a lot of pain and hurt and things that just haven't been resolved.
One of the other things you had written that I think is I found important, others may also, especially the times we're going through right now, is you write, it's funny how the smallest things can bring so much comfort. Now, sometimes we don't stop to realize that's important.
Yeah, and I think too, those things that you've just had throughout your life, you kind of go back to them sometimes. And it is a really important thread of this book is just finding some of the simple things, whether it's taking a walk outside and listening to the birds, being out in nature, or it's eating a big fluffy buttermilk biscuit that just tastes like home to you. We can take those little moments. We can't always fix the big things in life sometimes. They're just big, they're overwhelming, but we can take a moment and appreciate some of those smaller things and that we can have little snippets of peace, even if we haven't gotten to the point that we can fully have peace about a situation yet.
Sometimes I think authors subconsciously or consciously interject bits and pieces of themselves in their characters. And I'm wondering, did Anna Leah get her love of coffee from you?
Oh, definitely.
Okay. Because there's a couple scenes, at least one that I can remember, where she's really quite enthusiastic about her coffee.
Better coffee. Gotta have that to get going in the morning. At least I do. I write in the mornings before anyone else is awake at my house, and I'm not a morning person. And so I tell everyone the only people I can talk to at that time of day are my fictional characters, and I do have to have a cup of coffee in my hand.
Let's talk a little bit about your writing process because that can differ from author to author. The Bitter End Birding Society is a dual timeline. It's not the first time you've done that in a book, but I'm curious, how do you as a writer approach that? Do you write one timeline and then the other? Do you alternate back and forth? What kind of challenges does it present to you as an author?
So every book is a little bit different how the story kind of comes to me. Like I had said earlier, it originally was going to be a contemporary timeline, and that was what I had probably almost half of the book written. And we took that trip to Bitter End, and then these characters from the past start to come to life to me, and I that they're all I can think about. I keep trying to write the story as I originally planned, and it is just not happening. And so I actually stopped writing the present day timeline altogether and then wrote the entire past timeline and then wove them together after the fact and pulled the story together at the end, which is kind of a different process than what I normally do. A lot of times I'm weaving the two timelines together as I'm writing the story. But this time around, I found that I just couldn't do that. And it was an interesting balance with this particular book, trying to figure out how much of the story is present day, how much is the past, and are they each their own timelines, or is one just complementing the other? And so different books can look different ways. And so it was interesting trying to find my way with this book on that aspect of it.
Um, your past background before writing was in counseling. And I'm wondering, as an author, does that kind of give you a leg up when you're creating characters because you've been interacting with real people and seeing their flaws, their vulnerabilities? Does that help you when it comes to creating characters in your books?
It it's I find it to be helpful. It's one of my favorite parts of writing, in which I guess makes sense for who I am. But I love to just think through who a character is, what things brought them to that point, and what it will take for that character to make some sort of authentic change and have some authentic growth. Um, and the thing that I love about people and characters is you can take two people and put them through the exact same set of circumstances, and those two people are going to react in completely different ways. And so I really love the part of building a character to figure out how would this character react to the situation, and how will the other characters be similar or different in how they're reacting to what's going on.
Hmm. Your books fall under kind of the category of inspirational fiction, and some readers are not familiar with that. As a writer, how do you define inspirational novels, inspirational fiction?
For me, the stories have an element of spirituality and faith in it. I view people as being heart, mind, soul, body, and so for me, spirituality is just an aspect of who we are as human beings. Um, the faith of my characters and their type of relationship that they have with God can differ based on the character, just like every human being, and how they experience God and how they view the world through a spiritual lens, or some are more spiritually minded and some maybe not as much. And so I try to take that into consideration when I'm writing that story so that it comes through as just being an authentic person that has a faith background who is a part of the story. And if they have a faith background, they're going to have a certain view of the world, and how they process events it might be different than someone who maybe doesn't have a faith background. And so my goal is just to have that as an authentic part of the story. And when I write, there's always a thread of some sort of redemption, whether it's a relational redemption or it's spiritual redemption. There's going to be that element of redemption, and there's going to be hope at the end. Everything might not tie up all nice and neat in a bow. There might be painful things that happen in the story, difficult moments, but I want my reader, when they close the book at the end, to feel that sense of hope, that for these characters, there are good things ahead.
Hmm. You have a number of published books to your credit, and as a non-writer, does it get easier with each book you write, or does it become more difficult because now you know more about the process?
It can be a bit of a mix. I think there's some elements where I've grown in confidence in certain areas where at the beginning I was like, okay, I'm not really sure. And then I've grown in my trust for my instincts as a writer. But then there's also the aspect of getting in your head and what do people expect? And does this book measure up to what people think an Amanda Cox book should be? And so trying to balance that, the aspect of always learning and always wanting to grow as a writer, having that confidence, and then also getting some of those silly voices in your head to just calm down a little bit, just write the story and love writing it.
What have you discovered about the business of publishing now that you've published so many books that surprised you, that you wish someone had told you when you were first starting out, this is what you need to know about getting a book published?
I think one thing that was a little bit of a surprise to me, because I had been a reader, so I was someone who picked up books off the shelf. That was what I did. That's what I was comfortable doing. Then as a writer, I'm just loving the story and I'm enjoying creating these characters and creating this world. But then when communicating with industry professionals, realizing that they have to have a way to communicate your story in a way that people understand what they're going to get when they pick up the book. And so part of that was a little bit of a learning curve for me, because I think sometimes my books don't fit neatly into a particular genre. They kind of have elements from different ones. So learning how, I'm like, oh, okay, learning how to communicate to industry professionals what it is that readers are going to get out of my books and what they're going to want to read, like why they're going to read it. It took a little bit of learning, partially because I was learning who I was as a writer. Um, but then as I learned that, got better at communicating those aspects to know, okay, what can they say about my book that's going to make it marketable?
I think that's a challenge for a lot of writers. It's sometimes called the elevator pitch or something. How do you boil a book down into 1 minute? Or in some cases, authors and publishers and their staff will talk about their brand. How would you describe the Amanda Cox literary brand?
So I've been trying to figure that one out for a little bit, but I tell people that I write stories about hope, healing, and home,
Mhm.
and that I believe that fiction can be both entertaining and it can be healing. And so my hope is that when someone picks up my book, that they are going to feel that by the time they close the story.
Let's talk a little bit about Amanda as a reader, because books that we love can shape writers later down the road. What was your journey as a reader like?
So I loved reading anything I could get my hands on. I wore out my librarian with all the different picks that I wanted at my school. And because she was trying to find things that would challenge my reading level, but was still like age appropriate for what I'm reading. And so I would read everything that I could. I think the first book that I didn't actually read it. This book was read to me in third grade. And it would, every day after lunch, my teacher would read Where the Red Fern Grows.
Oh,
And that was the first time I could remember feeling something because of a story that I was listening to. I had enjoyed stories, but that's a really emotional tale
yeah.
that really touched my heart. And I just can remember, even as a little kid, thinking how cool it was that that writer wrote down words in print. And because of what was in print, and I'm listening to it, reading it, I felt something on the other end of it. I thought that was incredible, and I was like, "I wanna do that someday." And that was a long dormant dream, but I can clearly remember those moments of, I wanna write stories that when someone reads it, they feel something.
Who are some of the authors that you turn to today as a reader?
I am a big fan of books by, Katie Powner, Susie Finkbeiner. They do such a great job of drawing out these characters that feel like they could be your next door neighbor. And you just feel like you know them when you get to the throughout the story, and then even when you get to the end, you're like, "Wait a minute, that person doesn't live down the street from me," because it feels like you could just walk down there and knock on their door. And so I really enjoy stories like that, where it feels very just true to life kind of characters.
Now, the next question you can say as much or as little as you'd like, because I know authors can be protective, but can you tell us anything about what's next from you as an author?
I'm in the process of working on a new book. It's about this woman who has not had a particularly happy childhood and doesn't have a lot of memories that she's fond of. So, what she decided to do was start a restoration shop where she preserves memories and heirlooms for other people. And so that's kind of been her life story. And she's pretty content doing this. She's kind of living and hiding a little bit from her old life, but then one day, this mysterious package shows up at her shop with a name on it that nobody else recognizes, but she does because it's her actual name. And inside is this heirloom that someone wants her to restore and return back to who it rightfully belongs to. And so it's a bit of a journey, a little bit of a road trip. And the returning of this heirloom is not as straightforward as it seems, and it takes her on a bit of a journey.
How can readers learn more about you and your books? Are you on social media?
You can visit my website, amandacoxwrites.com. And then you can also find me on Instagram or Facebook as Amanda Cox Writes.
Do you find publicity is taking up more of your time as an author now, marketing and promoting?
It's definitely an aspect that I have to devote time to, and I have to guard my time in regards to that because the book has to get written too. So it's an interesting balance for sure.
Well, we're almost out of time. I can't believe how quickly it's gone by. We've been very fortunate to have with us author Amanda Cox, whose new book, The Bitter End Birding Society, will be available soon. You can reserve it through a bookstore like The Poison Pen or your local bookstore or library. I'd like to thank Amanda for taking time to share her thoughts with us today and for all of you tuning in to another virtual author chat at The Poison Pen. Thank you.
Thank you again for having me at the Poison Pen.
Thank you, Amanda.